He was the first man in U.S. history to hijack a plane for ransom. He leapt out of a commercial jet.
For over half a century, one man's daring crime has baffled authorities and captured imaginations. The hijacking of Northwest Orient Flight 305 by the mysterious B. Cooper, vanishing mid-air with $200,000 and leaving nothing but questions. He became a legend overnight.
$200,000 and was never seen again, dead or alive.
Countless investigators, amateur sleuths, and journalists have claimed to uncover his identity, yet none have delivered proof.
Who was D.B. Cooper?
Could the truth finally be out there, hiding in plain sight? Or is D.B. Cooper destined to remain America's greatest unsolved mystery? The tie. One of the smallest pieces of evidence in criminal investigations can sometimes tell the biggest story. For the FBI, that piece came in the form of a simple dark blue clip-on necktie left behind on the plane by D.B. Cooper. It was almost unremarkable at first glance, an ordinary tie, like millions sold in department stores. But for investigators, it was a tangible remnant of a man who had seemingly vanished into thin air, carrying $200,000 in cash and leaving no other trace behind. The tie would become one of the most analyzed and debated items in modern criminal history, a thread, quite literally, connecting the elusive hijacker to the world he left behind. When Cooper hijacked Northwest Orient Flight 305 on November 24, 1971, he presented himself as an unassuming man in a business suit. After boarding the plane in Portland and demanding $200,000 in cash, parachutes, and a fuel truck in Seattle, he calmly issued instructions to the crew, threatening violence if his conditions were not met. During the meticulous planning of his escape, he left behind almost nothing, except the tie, still draped over a coat hook near his seat. For the FBI, this became a critical clue, a rare physical object tied directly to Cooper. For decades, the tie sat quietly in the FBI evidence vault, catalogued but largely untouched. Early investigators had little more to go on than fingerprints and the tie's fabric, which offered no immediate leads. It wasn't until advances in forensic science brought DNA testing into routine criminal investigations that the tie regained attention. In the early 2000s, the FBI undertook one of the most exhaustive analyses of any item from the case. Experts carefully extracted fibers, potential skin cells, and other trace materials. Hoping that modern techniques could finally point to the hijacker's identity, DNA analysis promised a breakthrough. For the first time, investigators could attempt to match genetic material from the tie to a suspect, past or present. But the challenge was enormous. The tie had sat in storage for decades, potentially contaminated by evidence handlers, curious researchers, and environmental conditions. Even if Cooper's DNA were present, distinguishing it from decades of incidental contact was a delicate task. Laboratory teams used advanced methods, some of the same techniques that solve cold cases today, to isolate what might be unique biological material. Yet, despite their efforts, the results were inconclusive. No definitive match could be made to any known individual. The tie also became a symbol for both professional and amateur sleuths. Private investigators, armchair detectives, and internet communities seized upon it as the holy grail of Cooper-related evidence. They pored over photographs, examined the tie's fibers, and debated every microscopic detail. Some argued that the tie's material composition and style could narrow down Cooper's socio-economic background. Others suggested that hair or skin cells found on the tie could finally pinpoint the man. The tie became a canvas for speculation, demonstrating the lengths to which people would go to solve a mystery that had fascinated the nation for decades. Despite these exhaustive efforts, the tie yielded no answers. It remained a haunting reminder of the hijacker's elusiveness, a piece of physical evidence that teased investigators with the possibility of closure, but refused to reveal it. Its existence underscored the central paradox: of the D.B. Cooper case. Meticulous planning and near-perfect execution had erased nearly all traces of the man, leaving behind only fragments that sparked hope, but never certainty. For the FBI, the tie remained both a symbol of persistence and a testament to the limitations of forensic science, proving that even the most promising evidence could be rendered nearly useless by time and circumstance. Yet, the tie continued to fuel the search. New forensic techniques, public interest, and renewed efforts by investigative teams kept it in the spotlight, ensuring that D.B. Cooper remained a figure of obsession. Every time the FBI reopened the case or hinted at new findings, the tie was at the center of attention, a silent witness to a crime that still defied explanation. While it had not revealed Cooper's identity, it ensured that the man behind the legend remained anchored in reality, a tangible connection to a crime that had captured imaginations for decades. Even after 50 years, the tie serves as a reminder that sometimes the smallest clue can hold the biggest story. If only it could talk. Could this small remnant hold the key to understanding the man behind the daring hijack itself? Cooper, the hijacker. On the morning of November 24, 1971, an unassuming man boarded Northwest Orient Flight 305 at Portland International Airport. He was dressed in a business suit, carrying a briefcase, and projecting the calm demeanor of a routine traveler. No one could have guessed that he would soon execute one of the most audacious crimes in American history, vanishing into the skies with $200,000 and leaving a legend in his wake. This man would come to be known only as D.B. Cooper, a name assigned by the media, based on a misheard phone call during the hijacking. From the moment he passed through the boarding gate, Cooper's planning was meticulous. Once on board, he handed a note to a flight attendant, revealing that he was carrying a bomb and demanding $200,000 in cash, 4 parachutes, and a refueling truck ready in Seattle. The calmness of his demeanor contrasted sharply with the gravity of the situation, and the flight attendant, unsure whether to panic, quietly delivered his message to the cockpit. Cooper's clarity and composure immediately suggested someone who had rehearsed every detail. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Cooper's instructions were precise. He moved the passengers to the front of the aircraft, securing them as hostages while keeping the crew under strict but controlled supervision. He had studied the layout of the Boeing 727 and was aware of its unique rear stairway, which would later become central to his escape. For the next several hours, the flight became a tense negotiation, with Cooper issuing instructions and the authorities in Seattle scrambling to meet his demands. By the time the plane touched down in Seattle, Cooper had a ransom of $200,000 in 20 bills and 4 parachutes laid out on the tarmac. He allowed the passengers to disembark, keeping only the flight crew aboard. Once refueled and cleared for takeoff, he instructed the pilot to ascend to 10,000 feet, set the airspeed to 200 knots, and open the aft stairway. What happened next would cement his status as a criminal legend. Somewhere over the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest, Cooper leapt from the rear of the plane, disappearing into the night with his loot. The precision of the jump spoke to careful preparation. Cooper had likely chosen the conditions and equipment deliberately. His parachute, clothing, and instructions all pointed to a man who understood aviation and survival. Yet, despite the apparent planning, he left behind the tie, his briefcase, and other small traces that would later become critical evidence. His disappearance was so complete that it baffled law enforcement, inspiring decades of speculation, amateur investigations, and a cultural mythos around the daring escape. Flight crew members recounted the event with a mixture of fear and awe. The calm authority with which Cooper controlled the situation contrasted with the danger of a potential mid-air detonation. He never showed overt aggression beyond the threat of the bomb, and his politeness toward the crew added an almost surreal dimension to the crime. In many ways, the combination of composure, audacity, and vanishing act created the perfect criminal archetype, the anti-hero who executed a bold act without harming anyone and then disappeared, leaving the world to wonder. The FBI, stunned by the audacity and meticulous execution, immediately launched what would become the longest-running investigation in its history. Agents pieced together details from flight manifests, passenger statements, and the brief evidence left behind. Yet, the perfect planning by Cooper meant that the physical trail quickly evaporated. The very elements that made his crime legendary, timing, knowledge of aircraft, and stealth, also ensured that authorities were left chasing shadows. Even today, the hijacking itself reads like a story written for suspense. The calm negotiation, the precise instructions, the tension of the passenger's ordeal, and the dramatic disappearance over dark, uncharted wilderness combine into a narrative that has captivated journalists, historians, and armchair detectives for decades. Cooper's audacity was matched only by the mystery that followed, a mystery that no amount of investigation could definitively solve. How did the authorities respond? And why did early efforts fail to unmask this airborne phantom? Early efforts and false leads. The moment D.B. Cooper vanished into the night, the FBI faced a puzzle unlike any they had encountered. A man had hijacked a commercial airliner, demanded a ransom, and leapt into the wilderness, leaving virtually no trace behind. For investigators, the challenge was immense. Reconstructing the crime from scant evidence and unreliable eyewitness accounts, all while navigating a flood of public tips, media speculation, and false leads. What followed was a decades-long effort marked by hope, frustration, and occasional bursts of excitement. The FBI's initial investigation focused on every possible detail from the flight agents examined passenger statements, crew reports, and physical evidence left aboard the plane. The dark blue tie, briefcase, and a few fragments of Cooper's parachute were catalogued, fingerprints were dusted, and flight manifests scrutinized. Every piece of information was analyzed in the hope of finding a pattern or clue to the hijacker's identity. Yet, from the start, the trail was frustratingly thin. Cooper's careful planning had minimized the evidence he left behind, and the dense forests of the Pacific Northwest offered nearly limitless opportunities for concealment. Almost immediately, the media became a powerful player in the investigation. Newspapers across the country ran sensational headlines, painting Cooper as either a cunning criminal genius or an audacious folk hero. Television broadcasts replayed reenactments, and journalists chronicled every new lead with dramatic flair. The coverage fueled public fascination and complicated the investigation. The flood of tips from eager citizens ranged from plausible observations to outright fabrications. Some individuals claimed to have spotted Cooper on hiking trails or in remote towns, while others insisted they had personal knowledge of his life and motives. Each lead required verification, stretching the resources of the FBI and sometimes leading them down blind alleys. False confessions became another recurring obstacle. Over the years, dozens of individuals came forward, claiming responsibility for the hijacking. Some provided elaborate details that initially appeared convincing, while others offered only vague assertions. A man named Dwayne Weber, for example, told authorities he had carried out the crime and even described elements that seemed consistent with known facts. Yet, when investigators cross-checked timelines, physical descriptions, and corroborating evidence, each confession fell apart. The public, however, often seized on these claims, spreading the belief that Cooper had been caught, only for hope to be dashed repeatedly. Mistaken identities further complicated the picture. Suspects were often scrutinized based on circumstantial evidence, such as profession, appearance, or hobbies. Men who matched Cooper's physical description were questioned extensively, yet most could provide airtight alibis or lacked any concrete connection to the crime. Even when clues seemed promising, like a military background or knowledge of parachuting, they rarely survived closer inspection. The combination of public speculation and investigative thoroughness created a landscape where almost every new lead generated both excitement and disappointment. Despite tireless efforts, the early investigations revealed one key truth. D.B. Cooper was unusually careful, resourceful, and deliberate. The few physical traces he left behind, the tie, briefcase, and ransom money, were tantalizing but ultimately insufficient to confirm an identity. What the FBI encountered was a crime perfectly executed, leaving behind more questions than answers. These early failures not only shaped the trajectory of the investigation, but also contributed to the legend. Every hopeful lead that went nowhere reinforced the image of Cooper as a phantom, a criminal who had outwitted the authorities in an age before advanced forensic science. By the mid-70s, the investigation had reached a frustrating plateau. Agents had pursued hundreds of leads, interviewed countless suspects, and analyzed every scrap of evidence. But the hijacker remained unidentified. While law enforcement's early efforts were methodical and exhaustive, they were constrained by the limitations of the time. No DNA testing, limited fingerprint databases, and sparse technological resources. The combination of meticulous criminal planning and investigative limitations ensured that the Cooper case would remain unresolved and continue to fascinate the public for decades to come. Who, then, were the men considered most likely to be Cooper, and what made them stand out or fail the test? Notable suspects. Over the decades, a rotating cast of men has been scrutinized as potential candidates for D.B. Cooper. Each brought pieces of circumstantial evidence, tantalizing coincidences, or suggestive behavior, but none could be definitively linked to the hijacking. The enduring fascination with the case has meant that each new name sparks waves of media attention and amateur sleuthing, even if the evidence is thin. One of the earliest high-profile suspects was Richard Floyd McCoy, a former Green Beret and experienced skydiver who had executed a remarkably similar airplane robbery just a few months after Cooper's heist. McCoy had the skills, the planning experience, and a military background that mirrored what investigators imagined of Cooper. He even used a parachute escape, further fueling speculation. However, key differences, including the timing of the crimes, the method of approach, and his ultimate capture, ruled him out. McCoy himself denied involvement, and the FBI eventually closed his file as a non-match. Another notable candidate was Dwayne Weber, a man who reportedly confessed to the hijacking shortly before his death in 1995. Weber's account included intimate details of the flight and escape, which initially made investigators take notice. Supporters of the theory pointed to his military background and affinity for jump training. Yet inconsistencies in Weber's timeline and a lack of corroborating evidence left the claim unverified. His story remains a tantalizing what-if in the Cooper saga, a case study in how confessions can ignite excitement without delivering proof. William J. Smith also emerged as a suspect due to circumstantial connections. Investigators and amateur sleuths noted similarities in age, profession, and proximity to the crime scene. Yet, as with many other candidates, timelines, personal records, and the absence of physical evidence prevented any definitive conclusions. In many ways, Smith illustrates a recurring pattern. Men who seem plausible on paper often unravel under scrutiny. Beyond these prominent suspects, a long list of men ranging from ex-military paratroopers to ordinary civilians with ties to the Pacific Northwest have been proposed over the years. Some were identified through witness recollections, handwriting analysis, or slight physical resemblances to the composite sketch. Others were flagged by internet sleuths poring over public records and flight manifests. Yet every new suggestion ultimately faced the same hurdle: the inability to conclusively match evidence from the tie, parachute, or ransom bills to a real person. The persistent pattern across suspects highlights why the Cooper case is so uniquely confounding. He was not a careless criminal. He left almost no trace. Each lead, while intriguing, serves as a reminder of how carefully the hijacker planned his escape. Even modern investigative techniques, including DNA analysis of the tie and forensic re-examinations of bills, have failed to confirm any of these men as Cooper. The combination of meticulous planning, the limitations of earlier investigations, and the inherent randomness of surviving evidence has kept the suspect pool tantalizingly large, yet inconclusive. Beyond the suspects, the story of D.B. Cooper is also a story of fascination, a criminal who became a cultural icon. The Cooper obsession never dies. D.B. Cooper's story has grown far beyond the scope of a simple hijacking. The audacity of his crime, coupled with his mysterious disappearance, captured the public imagination and transformed him into a cultural icon. Films, books, TV shows, and podcasts have all dramatized the event, portraying Cooper as the quintessential anti-hero, a man who executed a bold crime with precision and vanished without harming anyone. This narrative appeals to the universal fascination with clever outlaws who challenge authority and evade capture. Public fascination also thrives on the unknown. Unlike most criminals whose identities are revealed, Cooper remains a blank canvas. People project their own ideas of who he might be: a daring adventurer, a skilled pilot, or a quiet man leading a secret life. The lack of resolution allows the story to evolve, adapting to the imaginations of each new generation. Amateur sleuths and internet communities dissect every clue, from the tie to the ransom bills, generating theories that range from plausible to wildly speculative. Even law enforcement acknowledges the cultural grip Cooper holds. His crime influenced aviation security, leading to the installation of Cooper vanes on aircraft and stricter hijacking protocols. Yet, the man behind the legend remains as mysterious as ever. In a way, Cooper's elusiveness enhances his myth. Every attempted identification, every alleged confession, only deepens the intrigue. Ultimately, D.B. Cooper's legacy is not just about the money or the crime, it's about the story itself. His audacity, cleverness, and disappearance created a narrative that continues to inspire fascination, debate, and admiration, ensuring that the legend of the airborne phantom endures in American culture. The mystery of D.B. Cooper continues to captivate, proving that some legends never fade. Is he found? Maybe never. Maybe soon. What do you think? Subscribe now to follow more stories that blur the line between fact and legend.